The truth has a way of slipping through the cracks, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. But if you're waiting for NASA to spill it, don't hold your breath. The world is watching, waiting, desperate for real answers about the fate of American astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams. Their short, 8-day mission to the International Space Station, ISS, has dragged on for nearly 9 months, stretching into an unplanned, weightless ordeal. It all started in June when they blasted off aboard Boeing's new Starliner crew capsule. The mission was supposed to be routine. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. A cascade of technical failures, thruster malfunctions, helium leaks, left NASA with no choice but to declare the return trip too risky. Since then, Wilmore and Williams have been stranded. But NASA refuses to call it that. Instead, they stick to their well-rehearsed lines, insisting the astronauts are not stranded, that they're actually grateful to be floating in space, orbiting more than 250 miles above their families for an unplanned 274 days. Sound believable to you? As someone who spent nearly a decade inside NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and now works as an aerospace consultant, I can tell you one thing for sure: NASA's words always need to be dissected carefully. This agency lost its way a long time ago. So, when Wilmore, an experienced Navy test pilot with 3 spaceflights under his belt, seemed to confirm what Elon Musk had been saying all along, it was staggering. Musk had claimed that SpaceX had been ready to bring the astronauts home much earlier, but that the mission was blocked by Joe Biden's White House. "We offered to bring them back early, but the offer was rejected," Musk said on Joe Rogan's podcast. Then, just a day later, Wilmore was asked about Musk's claim. His response? "I can only say that Mr. Musk, what he says, is absolutely factual." If that wasn't enough, Wilmore's teenage daughter, Darren, went even further in a resurfaced social media post from February. "There's a lot of politics, a lot of things I'm not at liberty to say, but there's been issues. There's been negligence. That's why this has kept getting delayed. Let that sink in. I won't pretend to know every conversation that took place behind closed doors at NASA. And to be clear, I'm no fan of Elon Musk. His aggressive cost-cutting approach has taken a sledgehammer to the federal workforce. But in this case, I don't doubt him one bit. Because here's the ugly truth: no one working at NASA is free to speak their mind. But as a former insider, I can. And I'm telling you right now, our astronauts are at risk. And if there's even a whisper of political corruption inside NASA, we must pay attention. Let's start with the most obvious reality: space travel is dangerous. Every launch is a gamble against the universe. Sure, Wilmore and Williams might say they're okay with staying up there longer than planned. They're professionals, after all. But let's be honest, they want to come home. Especially Williams. At 274 days in zero gravity, the 59-year-old astronaut is now dangerously close to breaking the record for the longest spaceflight by an older woman. Peggy Whitson spent 289 days in space when she was 56. The difference? Whitson knew exactly what she was signing up for. Williams? She probably didn't expect to land herself in the Guinness Book of World Records for this. And here's something NASA won't bring up: extended time in space isn't just exhausting, it damages the human body. Women already face a higher risk of osteoporosis, a condition that weakens bones. Older women? Even more so. When Williams finally returns to Earth, scientists will no doubt study the toll it took on her body. But there's an even bigger problem. NASA itself is lost. Back in 1958, this agency had one clear purpose: beat the Soviet Union in the space race. And it succeeded, putting a man on the moon in 1969. But after the USSR collapsed in 1991, NASA lost its direction. Think about it. The last moon landing was in 1972. By 1992, American astronauts were only making trips into Earth's orbit. The ISS? Construction didn't even begin until 1998, and it wasn't finished until 2011. Now, in 2025, NASA can send astronauts to space, but can't figure out how to bring them home? What happened? Simple. NASA stopped prioritizing innovation and started prioritizing contracts. And that brings us to Boeing. The aerospace giant has been NASA's main contractor for years, but lately, its reputation has taken a nosedive. Americans already know about the disasters plaguing Boeing's commercial aircraft. In January 2024, a door plug blew off a Boeing 737 MAX mid-flight. Not long after, at least 20 whistleblowers stepped forward, alleging Boeing was cutting corners to pump out planes faster. By March, CEO David Calhoun and several top executives had resigned. So, is it really shocking that Boeing's space division has similar issues? Just look at what happened with Starliner. In June 2023, Boeing delayed the launch of its first human-crewed Starliner mission because of a jaw-dropping discovery. Hundreds of feet of flammable adhesive tape were found inside the spacecraft, wrapped around critical wiring. And when NASA finally declared that Starliner was too unsafe to bring astronauts home, Boeing executives lost it. One NASA official later admitted Boeing was convinced the Starliner was in good enough condition, and NASA strongly disagreed. The thinking here was that Boeing was being wildly irresponsible. Chilling, isn't it? Yet, despite all of this, NASA still hesitated to cut ties with Boeing. Why? Because they're financially entangled. NASA gave Boeing a $4.2 billion contract to develop Starliner. And that contract? It's what left Wilmore and Williams stuck on the ISS. But after months of delays and corporate spin, NASA finally caved. Musk is now in charge of the rescue mission. In about 2 weeks, SpaceX will launch a new Dragon capsule to the ISS. And maybe, just maybe, Wilmore and Williams will finally return home as heroes. And when they do, the truth won't stay buried for long.